Breathe Easy, latest advancements and best practices in effective asthma management. A free lunch and learn at WJCT Studios on November 13th with Dr. Steve Dorman and Dr. Michael Koren. Registration at wjct.org/events. Amelia Island presents the 2024 Petanque Amelia Island Open, November 16th and 17th at the Marina in downtown Fernandina Beach. Everyone is welcome to watch. Finals on Sunday. Info at ameliaisland.com/open. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, a political dust-up over the mayor's travel bills. We'll discuss that and take your calls and questions on our monthly Ask the Mayor segment with Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan. Then, we check in with the kids in the pit. The Jacksonville Symphony Youth Orchestra's new music director talks about the season ahead. And drama, dark storylines, and dames. It's all part of WJCT's Noirvember. We preview the film series. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org or tag us on social. It's all ahead this hour, after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The World Climate Summit is underway in Azerbaijan. Delegates are talking about ways wealthy nations can pay to help developing countries manage climate change. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says climate finance is not charity, it's investment, because climate action is not optional.
The rich cause the problem, the poor pay the highest price. Oxfam finds the richest billionaires emit more carbon in an hour and a half than the average person does in a lifetime.
But Donald Trump's election victory has clouded the future of global climate action. Trump has suggested he may again pull the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accords. These set goals for countries to slow global warming. Meanwhile, Trump will nominate former New York Congressman Lee Zeldin to run the Environmental Protection Agency. According to the League of Conservation Voters, Zeldin opposed a handful of climate bills when he was in Congress. NPR's Elena Moore reports on Trump's choice for the EPA.
Trump praised Lee Zeldin in a statement, saying the former congressman will, quote, unleash the power of American businesses. He added that Zeldin will still maintain the highest environmental standards. On the campaign trail, Trump repeatedly vowed to increase domestic production of oil and natural gas. He also criticized Democratic-led incentives for electric vehicles and pledged to reduce current climate spending. Choosing Zeldin sparked backlash from some environmental groups, who say he's a step backward for climate policy. Elena Moore, NPR News, Washington.
NPR has learned Donald Trump will nominate Florida Senator Marco Rubio to serve as the next Secretary of State. NPR has also learned he'll tap Florida Congressman Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. Saudi Arabia has hosted leaders from the Middle East and Muslim-majority countries for a summit. They ended with a statement calling for a halt of global arms shipments to Israel and for its suspension at the United Nations. But NPR's Aya Batrawi reports the summit did not commit nations to abide by specific measures.
Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman opened the summit by reaffirming support for a Palestinian state, denouncing Israeli attacks on Iran, and accusing Israel of carrying out a, quote, genocide in Gaza, which Israel denies. Arab leaders, many of whom are opposed to Hamas, have been divided on how to contain the war, which has spread to Lebanon. And countries like Egypt and the UAE have kept ties with Israel, even using their ports for Israeli shipments throughout the war. The summit is the second of its kind to be held in Riyadh since the Hamas-led attacks of last year that killed 1,200 people in Israel. Israel's military has since killed at least 43,000 Palestinians, most of them women and children, according to Gaza's health ministry. Aya Batrawi, NPR News.
On Wall Street, Dow futures are up by more than 60 points. You're listening to NPR.
And you're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. A recount begins this hour in the race for Fernandina Beach City Commission seat. The City Commission Seat 2 race had Janice Minshew beating incumbent Commissioner and Vice Mayor David Sturgis by just 19 votes out of more than 9,000 ballots cast on Election Day. That narrow margin triggered the recount since Florida law mandates it if the vote is within 0.5% or lower. The recount is open to the public and takes place at the Public Services Building in Yulee. A Miami Proud Boy is vying for release from federal prison now that Donald Trump has been elected president. Joshua Ceballos reports.
Enrique Tarrio is the Miami-born ex-chairman of the Proud Boys. They're a pro-Trump far-right group that took part in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Though he was not present during the attack itself, Tarrio was charged with seditious conspiracy for his role in planning January 6th. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison. After Trump's election night victory, Tarrio's attorney put out a written statement seeming to angle for his client's release. He applauded Trump's win and said he is hopeful the judicial environment under the new administration could work in Tarrio's favor. Trump has pardoned his supporters and has previously refused to denounce the Proud Boys. I'm Joshua Ceballos in Miami.
This afternoon in Jacksonville, we'll have highs in the upper 70s to lower 80s and just a slight chance for rain as a cold front moves through. Partly cloudy overnight with lows in the upper 60s, partly sunny tomorrow, highs in the mid to upper 70s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, from political challenges at home to a shifting partisan landscape in Washington, we discuss the latest news chyrons with Mayor Donna Deegan in our monthly Ask the Mayor segment. Later in the program, we meet the new director of the Jacksonville Symphony Youth Orchestras. But first, a change in Washington could have major trickle-down impacts for a blue city mayor. Here to discuss what that could look like is Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan. Good morning, Donna.
Good morning, Ann. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. We're also taking your calls and questions. If you want to reach the mayor, you can call us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. So, Mayor Deegan, what is this, a speed bump or a roadblock when we're talking about changes at the national level?
Well, look, I mean, if you think about how I have conducted myself since the moment that I got into this office, I have made it clear I'm the mayor of a purple city, and I'm trying to bring everybody together. I mean, that is an important thing to me. I have been working together with, very successfully, a supermajority Republican city council since I got into office. So I don't really come to this, and I know that that is frustrating to some people who would like to hear me create more hot takes when it comes to some of this stuff. But at the end of the day, I have one job, and that is to move Jacksonville forward, to create better success for small businesses, to create better opportunities for people to be healthy, to make sure that our city can move forward. And I do that by working with everyone who wants to move our city forward. So I think if you look at the landscape in Washington, all of our representatives have been Republican. I have worked well with Senator Scott. I've worked well with Congressman Bean and others. I mean, Congressman Rutherford. That's the job, Ann. You know, and so I think you have to understand from the place where I am. Obviously, the election did not turn out the way I would have preferred that it turned out. But I think what everyone, and I'm sure some of the folks on the other side will recognize, is that this is a deeply divided electorate. In Jacksonville, I don't think anybody ever got to 50% in this election. So I think that the perspective that I take is one that is very pragmatic. We all have to work together. Unity is the only way forward. And while we most certainly must speak our truth, at the end of the day, we have to work together to move the city forward. And I don't see how my job in that regard changes at all.
You were on a couple months ago, though, and we spoke about having, a good relationship with Kamala Harris.
Absolutely.
And having that, Democratic White House. And And I asked if that relationship mattered, and your answer was something along the lines of, like, what do you think?
Yeah, no, certainly. That has been a very good relationship, and obviously my desire would have been for that to continue. But here we are. And so you work with the folks that you need to work with to move the city forward. Certainly would that have made my life easier? Sure. Would have made my life easier to not have a supermajority Republican city council. But I have to tell you, the folks over there, especially that want to move this city forward, I can't tell you how wonderful it's been to work with Council President White. We don't agree on everything, but we work toward consensus on those things that we can work toward, and we have mutual respect for each other. And I have said for so long, in terms of how we conduct ourselves. And I said this, frankly, to my own party during this election. I understand that we have sharp differences on some issues. On kitchen table issues, if you look at the public polling on those issues, very much aligned with what Vice President Harris was trying to move forward. But I think what happens is when we engage in mutual hate for each other, as hard as it can be on some issues not to engage in that way, I just don't think that is a way forward. So I think that my particular brand of politics, if I have to call it that, is I am very pragmatic, and I like to build toward consensus. We have a purple city, and so we have to do our best to bring all voices into the room. And I think at the end of the day, it's where we come up with our best policy.
But Mayor Deegan, this is not just a one-way relationship, right? We're talking about federal dollars coming from D.C. That was a big part of what you campaigned on, was using that money and accessing that money.
Yeah.
And I would expect that could change.
I don't know. I wouldn't think that somebody like a Susie Wiles would want Jacksonville to suffer. This is an important area to her. That will all. We'll find out, right? But at the end of the day, I wouldn't think that our representatives wouldn't want to bring money home to Jacksonville.
Well, I was curious about that. I mean, is there a benefit to the opposing party to see you struggle, to see you have a difficult time in a relationship with, Washington, or do they also kind of want you to succeed because it's Jacksonville that is in the balance?
Well, I don't think they need to want me to succeed as much as they need to want Jacksonville to succeed. And I think that's how we've all approached this. I think it's why I've worked well with them so far. I think we all have done our best to make sure that Jacksonville can succeed. And so the truth is, Ann, if we didn't bring in one more federal dollar for the rest of my term, we would probably still be way ahead of any other administration that's ever been in this office, because we've brought in so much in terms of federal dollars so far. But it will absolutely be my priority to continue to work with whoever is there to bring home as much as we can for Jacksonville. And beyond that, to continue to try to build this city to be exactly what I believe that it can be. And we do that through all the policies that we've all tried to move forward since I've been here.
I'm curious if you feel the need to shift at all, given the apparent shift to the right that the nation is experiencing. And, I say that I think the most recent numbers show that, more than 90% of counties in the country moved towards Donald Trump in this election. So do you feel like you're reflecting the electorate? Do you feel like you need to move where you stand at all in order to better represent people of this city?
I have never changed who I am or what I stand for, ever, and I won't. That's not what this is about, I don't think. I think it is about being open to other voices, and it's why I have Republicans and independents in my administration. I don't require that every voice agree with mine. I think you come to the best policies by bringing all voices into the room. It doesn't mean I'm going to change who I am. I'm certainly not. But that, as I've said to you many times, I am a Democrat with the mind of an independent, and I was an independent for a long time, and I still bring that mindset to what I do. I think you cannot shut out every other voice, because this is how we end up seesawing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I recently spoke with a group at the Public Policy Center at JU, and there were a lot of young people there that were seeking their degrees in public policy. And I said, I have to tell you, I am a little encouraged by the fact that so many of you are registering as no party affiliates, because at some point, something has got to shake the two-party system out of just listening to the extremes on both sides. There has to be a point at which they begin to talk to the great middle of the country. And I think that if we continue to see young people register that way, and you see that's the largest group of increase is no party affiliates. You know, I really think you're going to get into a situation where politicians are going to realize, you know what? I've got to start talking to somebody besides just my side if I'm going to win elections. But as far as I'm concerned, I am, you know, Jacksonville knows me. You know, Tony Cho the other day we had an event at the Phoenix, which was wonderful.
And he's the developer of that new arts.
Yes, that arts
district.
It's just wonderful. And one of the first things he said, I wrote it down because it resonated so much with me. He said, "Success moves at the speed of trust." And I think people in this city largely trust me because I am always who I am. And I am very pragmatic and number one, a huge believer in this city. And I believe that to move forward, we have to put partisan politics aside and we have to be able to work together. And, you know, there are deeply held beliefs that I have, that I will have, and I will say that I have. But I think that by and large, people know that I will move in benefit of this city for every way that I can.
Were you surprised by the outcome of the election?
And I don't think there's a thing in the world that could surprise me anymore about just about anything. I'm now at the ripe old age where I don't think a whole lot surprises me. So disappointed, yes. Surprised, not really. I think if you look at every single major election around the world since the pandemic, if you had a right-wing party in power, that party lost or was greatly diminished. If you had a more left-leaning party, that party either lost or was greatly diminished. I think there is a lot of discontent in the country still since the pandemic. And I think that people aren't always completely engaged. And when they're not, they simply blame the folks that are there for their pain. I think the president is right, and it is probably will not be until a couple of years down the road that you may see the full benefit of some of these infrastructure projects and other projects that are put into place to help the middle class. That is what it is. You know, that's how it is. So what I would say to my party and anybody that wants to move the electorate is that what we need to do is make sure that we increase the number of channels by which we are talking to people about kitchen table issues. And look, that is not me saying that misogyny or racism didn't play any role in this election. I'm not saying that because I know somebody's going to say that to me. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that anyone who wants to isolate this to one thing is missing the mark, I think. And I think that when you look at the policies that are extraordinarily popular, the affordable housing policies, some of the healthcare policies, the policies around expanding Medicare to make sure that it covers dental and hearing and things like that. Those are all extraordinary in the 60s, you know, in popularity across the board. Somehow we have to find a way to expand that message so that people are actually hearing it and not get so caught up in the food fight. I've said it for years, right? We are not going to win on grievance politics. I don't believe in it. I will not engage in it. And when I see it, I'm largely going to ignore it. If we do not engage with people on their pocketbooks and where they live, you know, it's at our own peril.
We're talking to Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan. If you're just joining us, she is here to take your calls and questions. You can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. We've got a message from Susan on Facebook. She says, a question for the mayor. The school board voted that they want the superintendent to ask you to prioritize sidewalks so school children are safe walking to school and to bus stops. Has he contacted you?
Yes. In fact, we're going to be doing an event together in the not too distant future, but there's also going to be a campaign about that. We had a number of situations where children were struck on their way to school or where there were accidents, and we need to make sure we shine a light on that. So, yes, he has reached out, and we will be doing some work on that front.
All right. Let's see. We've got a call from Chad on the South Bank. Good morning, Chad. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, Donna. This is Chad. I used to run the Spanish TV station.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Donna, you know, I walk every morning on the river, either the North Bank or the South Bank. I live on the South Bank, but I go to the Y. And I've seen a lot of the unsheltered through the couple of years that I've been doing it. A lot of them are there permanently. It looks like they move from place to place, especially now there's some construction. All over the city, Here on the South Bank, you see people who are basically the regulars. But now, as it gets colder up north, you're going to see even a lot more people coming down here. What are you planning to do? What do you think the city can do? Because these people, well, they need help. Most of them have emotional issues, let's say. Not all of them are vagrants as such. Some of them are just deeply troubled people. But what can the city do?
Well, sure. And we've been working on that for a while, especially since the passage of the state law that says that folks can't camp on the streets. We've been working directly with JFRD. They have a team that is in place that is in training right now for trying to get into the streets, talk to folks, get them attached to services. I think we've allocated $1.5 million to that effort so far. So our next work is going to be on expanding the number of shelter positions. That's where we had asked for additional money in the budget, which we did not get, at least so far, because I think we have 500 shelter beds, which are mostly full right now. So that's going to become an issue for us. But what we've started right now with those JFRD teams, they are in training in order to make sure that they can reach out to people, make sure we help them to secure their belongings, make sure that we get them to a place where they can receive the services they need. And we're continuing to work on a 5-year plan that will help us to, in a comprehensive way, address that issue.
I want to follow up on that a little bit. So October was the month of implementation of this new state law that the city is required to enforce.
Yeah.
And then I believe November was going to sort of be the beginning of enforcement of that. Do you know, has there been any enforcement? And by that, I mean, people who have been, if they have refused to go to a shelter or to remove themselves from a place, that are going to jail.
From my understanding, those numbers are very small, in the single digits. But that is where we are now. By January 1st, we can be sued if we are not implementing a program that gets these folks to another place and gets them the services that they need. So that's what the process is right now.
And so for people like Chad who are passing these semi-permanent encampments along the riverbank, for instance, what is happening there?
Well, I can't tell you particularly about that encampment. I'm not aware of that particular one, but I will say that what is happening now is that our JFRD teams are in training and are starting to reach out to people to try to connect them with services, telling them that about the new state law, that they cannot stay where they are, and that they need to avail themselves of various services. Arrest would be an absolute last resort.
But
JSO doesn't want that either.
If the beds are full, though, or nearing full.
We're working right now to expand that, but we're also working with the organizations that currently have those spaces available. As you know, people come and go, but as the gentleman said, as Chad said, as we get into the colder months, that'll become a bigger issue for us, and so time is of the essence to make sure that we continue to put this plan into place.
All right, we've got a call from Taylor at the Beaches. Good morning, Taylor. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Ms. Deegan.
Good morning.
I've spoken with you prior to you becoming an elected official about public policy. And since you've been implemented, I think now you have implemented this policy as far as recording to the pension program with public employees. If 18-year-olds are not granted the same benefits as a 28-year-old, a 38-year-old, or a 48-year-old, I'm trying to understand how that's not racist, misogynistic, sexist, whatever y'all want to call it. If an 18-year-old does not receive the same benefits as a 28, 38-year-old, I'm trying to circle to understand how that's good for public policy and the public coffers.
Thanks, Taylor. Taylor has called before about this, and I think he's referring to the fact that there's kind of gradations of reward in the pension system. Sometimes people who've been in longer are reaping a bigger benefit, and I think his contention is that younger people are therefore being discriminated against.
I think in terms of the pension, we negotiated the best deal that we could negotiate with police and fire. We felt that it was incredibly important to move back toward a defined benefit for recruiting purposes, for retention purposes, And we did that in lockstep with our negotiators and the folks at both of those organizations. So we're doing the best we can with it. I mean, in a perfect world, it would be nice to be able to return a pension to city employees, but that may not be something that is available to us at this moment.
Do we know if we're seeing some additional benefit because of the restoring of the pension? I mean, have you heard from?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Mhm.
In speaking with JSO, the number of recruits, the number of folks that are applying to be part of JSO has just skyrocketed.
Really?
And I think that we were losing people to other police departments because they had defined benefits and we didn't, or we would train them up and then they would move to other places. So what we are seeing so far is a greater interest in law enforcement, and at the end of the day, that's good news for our citizens.
We've got a call from Kathleen in Riverside. Good morning, Kathleen. Go ahead.
Good morning, Ms. Deegan. One of the reasons I would love to be no party affiliation, however, that excludes me from voting in the primary.
I know.
Would love to see open primaries in this state, and I know at a city level this can't happen, but I'd also like to see ranked voting. So all
that's been
heard.
outlawed on a statewide level. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. The state legislature has said that cannot happen in Florida. But I you know what, I have more and more moved to where you are in terms of the primaries. I understand why the parties are in some ways reticent to do that, but at the same time, I think with the numbers of young people who really don't want to be affiliated with a party, and not just young people but others, I'm seeing more and more the benefit of an open primary system.
We're talking to Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan. She is taking your calls and questions. You can call or email. We have an email from Ricardo. Would the mayor comment on how she sees the political impact of Susie Wiles potentially recruiting or hiring lots of Jacksonville Republicans away from town? Many talented and ambitious politicians may want to go to D.C. Will this clear the field for, I guess he means your reelection?
Yeah, listen, I'm not even thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about continuing to try to implement the policies that we need to move our city forward. So I will say in terms of Susie Wiles, I sent her a message of congratulation when she got the chief of staff position. Susie is just an incredibly talented political operative. There's no denying any of that.
And for people who don't know, I mean, she was chief of staff for Mayor Delaney. She worked for John Payton. She worked on Lenny Curry's campaign, for Governor DeSantis' campaign before joining the Trump administration. So she's got a lot of local connections and statewide connections.
She has a lot of local connections, and so I do anticipate that a lot of folks from Jacksonville may want to go and work in the administration. I read this morning that Councilman Diamond is looking at the position of Michael Waltz, since he's going to be moving into the administration. I don't know what his
state representative for St. Augustine
area.
I
don't know what his position is on that, but that's something I read this morning. I suspect he won't be alone in terms of wanting to take advantage of some of those things. But
I don't suppose it would break your heart if Councilman Diamond was not on the council any longer. He's been a little bit of a adversary.
Listen, like I said before, I will continue to work with anybody who wants to move this city forward. I have very little use for political gamesmanship, and so you just won't hear me go there very often. I don't like to give that stuff oxygen, to be honest, but it's very clear, and I think to most people, very clear when things are done specifically for political expediency and when they're done for genuine concern for the community. But listen, wish him the best.
All right. I want to ask you, on that note, in terms of relationship with council, recently they've requested an audit is underway of your trip to London and subsequent personal trip to Italy.
Yeah. They did the same thing last year.
Fair.
It's very interesting to me. This is one of those things where I would be astounded if there was one person on that council. They work with me every day. They know my heart. They know how I do business. They've seen that I have created all these transparency dashboards across the city. And you can ask anybody that was on that trip. Ask anybody from the chamber, anybody from Jax USA, how hard I work when I go on those trips to London and how fruitful they have been. But I will tell you, Anne, that I don't think there's a soul on that council that really believes there's a thing that I did that needs to be audited. That is a in my mind purely political move. And you see the folks who are talking about it and the folks who aren't. I'll just say that. You see the folks who have stayed out of that particular what I call shenanigans, and people who don't. But that's fine. It is all part and parcel of the job. I told Jax USA and the chamber a month or two before we left that I'll be there for the first 4 days. Please shove every important meeting that we have into those 4 days that I need to be at, because then your mayor, who hasn't taken a proper vacation since she's been in office, is going to go to Italy for a few days. And everybody knew that. So they shoved all the important meetings into those first 4 days. I participated in every one of them, met with scores of companies that were trying to get to Jacksonville, raced around to do as many events as I could possibly do, met with the business leaders that we felt would move our city forward in terms of connections to Jacksonville. And then I went on a personal vacation. So the only thing, and this is true last year too, I didn't go on a personal vacation last year, but last year, the only expenses that I turned over to the city for my personal travel was the hotel rooms for the days that I worked with the city. So that was the 4 days that I was there working for the city. I paid for all my own food. I paid for all my own travel. And I don't have to do that, by the way. I just do because I can, and it's fine. I stay in that hotel because that is the proximity to all the meetings that we have, and the chamber and Jax USA get a special rate for that. But I think that's an appropriate cost to pass along to the city. And again, I will say, I don't believe there's a soul on that council that believes that I would ever go on a taxpayer-funded anything on a personal vacation. Of course, that's ridiculous. And I think most people recognize that.
We have a message from Cup of Josh on Instagram saying, after last week, it's hard to take anyone who is worried about minor travel expenses seriously. We've got a call from Michael in Jax Beach. Go ahead, Michael.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to hear your stories. One of my favorite stories in University of Florida was think globally and act locally.
There you go.
And I think you've done a great job of that. Both sides of the fence aren't so good on climate change, and maybe you could address what we're doing locally to assist that issue that no one wants to talk about.
Well, I think that what we're seeing is that, again, we need to do a much better job of educating people about how this impacts their lives. And I think as far as being a mayor is concerned, what I can do is make sure that we are creating the most resilient city that we can possibly have, but also help people to understand that the more energy there is in the atmosphere, the more heat there is in the atmosphere, the higher our seas are going to get and the more at risk we're going to be. And that's important because people's homes are at stake and our military bases are at stake. And the way that we build this city going forward in terms of developers making money or not making money, those are all things that people need to understand are at stake in all of this. So this should not be a Democratic or Republican issue. This is just something that we need to continue to educate about. And we need, I think that where we fall into a hole is I think that we try to vilify people who either don't get it or are not in the same place where we are. We need to continue to try to educate. And I think, I really, if I could do one thing in this city, it would be to make people understand that our only way forward is to move together. That's it. We've got to listen to each other and then do our best to educate on objective fact versus things that make us get our feelings hurt. There are a lot of things that we many of us believe deeply. But at the end of the day, it is critically important on this issue, as you bring up, for us to get our arms around it, because it is going to have a direct impact on our city, which is largely made of water. So if we don't get our arms around this issue, it's going to be a problem. So what we've learned in polling is that most people just are not they're not keyed into this issue so much because they're more worried about expenses for their families and things of that nature. So we've just got to make people understand that the less we pay attention to this issue, the more those other issues are going to be an issue for them.
We've got a call from Mark on the west side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Hey, Mayor.
Good morning.
I've always been opposed to city incentives or any incentives to get people to move here. We're in Jacksonville, Florida. We've got people beating down the door to get here, and we always have. And I just don't understand why we have to incentivize anybody, anything, anytime, anywhere. About that, when you're out in these foreign lands, these foreign places, trying to persuade people to move to Jacksonville, Florida, and set up their business down here and pump up the tax base and all that kind of good stuff. Do you ever who brings up incentives? Is it ever you? Is it ever them? If it's them, do they say, hey, how much money you're going to give us? And you should say, not one red cent. Jacksonville's a fine place. You should come because you need to. I mean, is that ever brought up in your initial conversations, or is that just down the road somewhere?
Thanks, Mark.
Listen, I wish that was realistic for us at this point. I think we will get to a point in Jacksonville where we reach a tipping point where that won't be the case. But for a variety of reasons, it has been very expensive for people to build here. And in addition, for businesses, we just need to, in terms of that, the big thing is we're competing with other cities around the state and around the country. And so whenever there's competition, businesses are going to go where they get the best return. And so you have to make sure that you are offering something competitive. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that we have the best city on the entire planet. We're on the river and the ocean and we have these wonderful interstates that run through us, and we have a fantastic port, and all that is great. But companies will always look for where they can get the best return for their investors. And to be competitive, unfortunately, that means sometimes you have to offer incentives, but we certainly don't go into any of these negotiations saying, "Hey, how much can we give you?" That's not how it works. But you are presented with what they are being offered from other places, and you have to show why your city can be competitive on that front.
We've got an email from Doug. He says, "Hi, Mayor Deegan. A big concern of mine as a resident of the North Side is New Berlin Road. It is very heavily traveled, and it is in a shambles with potholes galore and needs sidewalks or bike paths for people to get around."
Well, as you know, Ann, infrastructure has been one of my top priorities since I've been in office. And one of the things that we did with the CIP was to move up infrastructure projects.
That's capital improvement.
Oh, sorry. Yes, capital improvement projects that deal with issues that have been long neglected. And I think that when you look at areas where the sidewalks have been long neglected or where we need bike paths, I mean, we need that all over the city, frankly. Those are places where we really need to focus. And I think that is where I have the most hope for moving forward, because I think everybody, or at least most of the people that serve this city that aren't just baldly political, I think most of the people who are here to serve this city understand that without the infrastructure fixes that have been long neglected in this city, it's going to be hard for us to function as a city where our residents are safe, where we can be a place where people have a good quality of life. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we're here to provide.
I'm guessing New Berlin Road is probably particularly impacted, though, by like port traffic, right?
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
And so is there a solution that could involve the port in some way to mitigate if he's seeing really badly damaged roads in that area?
Well, I'm sure that there are any number of entities that would need to come together to work on those solutions. But certainly, I mean, the port has been incredibly helpful in terms of trying to work with us to solve problems. So I'm sure that's a conversation we can have.
I got a message from Latrice on Facebook. She says, "Mayor Deegan, thanks for bringing respect and dignity back to the political landscape." We also have a email from Kelly saying, "I appreciate you, Mayor. I was born and grew up in Jax. I appreciate your forward gaze for the city and speaking on the same issues, asking the question, what do each of us want, and then decide where you can compromise." So just basically saying, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That always is helpful.
Yeah. I want to talk briefly about Mike Weinstein. You
Sure.
appointed him. He's going to be your next chief of staff. He served under Austin, Mayor Delaney, Mayors Payton, now you. He, I guess, must know where all the bodies are buried for, the financial world of the city. How helpful is it to have somebody that's kind of been the chief financial officer for so many administrations?
Well, he's held a number of positions for many administrations, Mike is incredibly talented. We worked very well together during the Jaguars negotiation. I learned that he has very strong opinions and is also willing to take direction, and I appreciate that. But he's very talented.
And a Republican.
Who is extraordinarily apolitical. And frankly, as I've said from the very beginning, and I'm just going to keep on beating this drum, local government is about sidewalks and potholes and giving people voice in their governance and making sure that we move the city forward for small business and making sure our community is healthy. And on all those fronts, we really should not be married to parties as much as who is willing to work together to move the city forward. And Mike is one of those people. He's like Council President White in that he really wants what is best for the city and is willing to work together with everybody to make that happen. And you're right, having somebody who is very well aware of, as you say, where the bodies are buried and how things work is incredibly helpful. But he's also just a really great human being.
Just briefly, your husband announced he is retiring from the world of meteorology after 43 years, so that's a big deal.
Oh my gosh!
First dude is going to be.
The first dude's going to be. His big thing is no socks, no ties. I mean that is his. He's been saying that for years. I can't wait to never have to. And I'm like, well, listen, you're still going to be the husband of the mayor, so you're going to have to deal with some socks and ties.
The hair is going to grow longer, though.
It is going to grow longer, and I told him that's fine with me as long as it's well kept.
Right. Mayor Deegan, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Ann. Thank you.
All right. Up next, leading young musicians to discover the transformative power of classical music. Welcome back. Well, he comes to Jacksonville with a mission to support new music and develop young musicians. Here to tell us about the job and his game plan is newly appointed music director of the Jacksonville Symphony Youth Orchestras, Dr. Nathaniel Efthimiou. Thank you for being here.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you are also recently appointed assistant conductor of the Jacksonville Symphony. But on the youth front, when did you begin playing? Were you ever in a youth orchestra? And for people who can't see, you look extremely young. I don't know how old you are, but you look, probably the age of a youth musician. But did you play with youth orchestras?
Yes, I did. Yeah, youth orchestra was a big part of my life growing up, and actually a big reason why I became a conductor. So I started, playing piano at a pretty early age, 4 or 5. Picked up violin after that. And I joined a youth orchestra, a couple of different youth orchestras, did some composing along the way. And it was, so I grew up in upstate New York, and I played in the Empire State Youth Orchestra. And it was in the Empire State Youth Orchestra that I really fell in love with orchestral music, and in particular, what an orchestra can do for an individual, what it did in my life, but also with a group of musicians, a group of young people.
So what do youth orchestras bring to the game generally for young musicians? How help them? What kind of avenues does it open for them? What are they learning in a youth orchestra?
Yeah, I guess I mean there's obviously the musical aspect, the technical aspect of developing their technique and musicianship on their own instrument. Um, that's sort of baked into the process. For me, what I like to kind of explore is how participation in the orchestra and what it means to play in an orchestra with other people, what that can do for them individually and personally, whether they go into music or not.
And what can it do?
So I think for me and what I see in others is it can help really develop or help kids discover their own personal voice, whether it's through their instrument or whether it's socially outside of music. But for me, it was a big aha moment when I realized through the help of a conductor in youth orchestra when I was in youth orchestra, in realizing that when we're making music, we're saying something personally. It's not that and the phrase that they used was we don't play our instruments, we sing through our instruments, it's this idea that we are saying something personally. And then you get into an orchestral situation where you're playing with other people, and you have to bring that personal commitment to what we're doing, but ultimately you're giving that to everyone else in the group.
And so, when people reach that stage where they're in a youth orchestra, is that supplanting like private lessons? Do they usually continue to train on their own and with the group?
Yeah. Typically, they continue private lessons. Many of them are also in their school orchestras. These kids are they're extremely busy, extremely committed, and in love with music. And they have experienced and continue to experience what music can do in their lives. And it's a great. All of our lives are busy, and it's a great sacrifice. That they are giving in commitment to music and the arts, and they see the value in that, and it's quite inspiring.
And so, having kids who enjoy playing their musical instruments and are very, very talented is one thing, but the kind of music that they perform, I'm curious if they, must come to a youth orchestra with an appreciation for classical music, for instance, if that's something that they have to learn to love, or if you try to, approach it with more contemporary sounding music, kind of how that all fits together.
Yeah, so many do come to the orchestra because they have a love for what we might call classical music. But I think that it's really important to not pigeonhole repertoire. I like my goal in programming is to give them as wide a possible appreciation and exposure to a wide range of musical styles. And so, in every program, I try to choose a piece that's kind of off the beaten path, so to speak, because I think it's important for the future of our art form. That at the earliest possible age, that there's the widest breadth of appreciation and exposure to music as possible. So that's a big thing for me. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you're doing programming, then give us an example of the kinds of music that you might include and why.
Yeah, so like we just had our first fall concert this past Sunday, and one of the pieces that the Philharmonic played that I programmed was a piece by Indian American composer Reena Esmail. She's LA based, and she self-describes her music as lying in the space between Western classical music and Indian classical music, and so she incorporates a number of ragas in the piece. And it's an interesting exercise.
And what is a raga?
So it's basically like in Indian classical music, it would be kind of equivalent to the scales in Western classical music, except there are like hundreds of them, and they're very ornamental. They're often used as the structural base for improvisation in Indian classical music. And so to translate that into Western notation and for an orchestra is a unique challenge in and of itself, which Reena does marvelously, but then to translate then that into a performance and learning the style, and it gets very rhythmically complex. So it's that kind of through the orchestra we can engage with and explore other cultures and ways of making music.
We've got just about a short minute here left, but what are you most looking forward to with this new position? You said you had a concert this last weekend. What's coming up?
Yeah, well, so this weekend, on Sunday at 3 p.m. is our Passport Travels Our Family concert, which I'm particularly excited about. And sort of to the point that we were just talking about, it's Passport Travels, sort of looking at music as a way of taking us around the world, to different places, to different times, and even, exploring the ways that it can take us into our own imagination. So there's music on the program for everyone. I would encourage everyone to go to jacksymphony.org. You can get tickets for that very extremely reasonably priced. This is the time, if you have never been to the symphony, to come check it out.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Nathaniel Efthimiou, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
And
Thank you.
good luck with all.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, the shadowy world of deception and suspense in the noir classic Double Indemnity.
The Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens in Jacksonville curated art from ancient times to the present. Explore galleries, enjoy refreshments and entrees at the cafe, and treasures in the museum shop. More at cummermuseum.org. Mayo Clinic, working to detect the undetectable by using AI technology to identify signals in the human voice that indicate heart disease. More at mayoclinic.org/Florida.
I killed Dietrichson. Me, Walter Neff, insurance agent, 35 years old, unmarried, no visible scars.
WJCT Public Media invites you to a special screening of Double Indemnity as we celebrate Noirvember.
The murder's never perfect. Always comes apart sooner or later.
Wednesday, November 13th, Cash Bar, Piano Jazz, and Film Noir. Doors open at 6:30, film screens at 7. Double Indemnity, November 13th, RSVP at wjct.org/events.
What does a second Donald Trump presidency mean for the world?
Just a sense of a deteriorating world order. The liberal world order that was built after World War II, after the Cold War, seems to be disintegrating a little bit.
I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. How Europe, Mexico, and China are preparing for Donald Trump's return to the White House. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
With most of the results now in, it appears half the country is looking forward to Donald Trump's return. That leaves the other half who are not. Sally's in Missouri.
Fear and anxiety for our future and for the future of my children and my grandchildren.
Elections can be stressful. How are you feeling about the consequences of this one? We share your stories next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, if you like your drama dark, seedy, and cynical, this is your season. It's Noirvember, when WJCT showcases the finest offerings of the film noir genre. And here to tell us what's on tap is WJCT station manager and film curator extraordinaire, David Luckin. Hey, David.
Hello, Ann, and I'm so glad to announce that we will screen Double Indemnity tomorrow night.
Double Indemnity.
It's 7. It's such a good film. It's the epitome of film noir. It came out in 1944 when film noir was kind of born.
A Billy Wilder film.
It sure is. And Billy Wilder, like so many of the other great directors, came to America escaping the Nazis. And they brought their film style to America and started making these incredible films. It was more an expressionism vision mixed with pulp fiction from the 30s. So they took all those great books from the 30s, Postman, Double Indemnity, and turned them into movies in the 40s.
I didn't know until you started kind of telling me more about noir film that really was sort of this application of this German stylistic shooting.
Mixed with American crime.
Yeah.
So it turned into an interesting genre. And it wasn't named until after the war when these films started being screened in France, in Paris. And the reviewers were writing reviews, and one reviewer finally said, wow, Noir, the dark film. And then it stuck. But no one called the film noir when they were being made. They were just good mysteries.
This one came out in 44, and you say that was a seminal year in the world of noir film.
It is, because that year Murder, My Sweet came out with Dick Powell. Laura came out. Otto Preminger directed it with Gene Tierney and Dana Andrews. And Phantom Lady and Double Indemnity. Those four, if you watch them, you see the foundations, the building blocks, whatever you want to call it, for noir forever. The narrative, they drug Dick Powell and he hallucinates all kinds of things. But these are the elements, the rain-soaked streets, the high heels on the streets, the naked light bulbs with no shades, the neon signs. One of my favorite, Ann, is a gentleman is in Peekskill, New York, sitting in his lonely room. In Peekskill, the only part of the neon sign that's still flashing is the kill. That's typical noir. It's just very subtle sometimes and not so subtle. And the dialogue is what I really love. They just wrote, James Cain wrote this, Raymond Chandler helped write the screenplay. And we've got an example of that if you want to hear a little bit.
I'd love to.
Here's a little Edward G. Robinson explaining to his boss actuary tables.
You ought to take a look at the statistics on suicide sometime. You might learn a little something about the insurance business.
Mr. Keyes, I was raised in the insurance business.
Yeah, in the front office. Come now, you've never read an actuarial table in your life, have you? Why, we've got 10 volumes on suicide alone. Suicide by race, by color, by occupation, by sex, by seasons of the year, by time of day. Suicide, how committed? By poisons, by firearms, by drowning, by leaks. Suicide by poison, subdivided by types of poison, such as corrosive, irritant, systemic, gaseous, narcotic, alkaloid, protein, and so forth. Suicide by leaps, subdivided by leaps from high places, under the wheels of trains, under the wheels of trucks, under the feet of horses, from steamboats. But Mr. Norton, of all the cases on record, there's not one single case of suicide by leap from the rear end of a moving train. And you know how fast that train was going at the point where the body was found? 15 miles an hour. Now, how can anybody jump off a slow-moving train like that with any kind of expectation that he would kill himself? No soap, Mr. Norton. We're sunk, and we'll have to pay through the nose, and you know it. May I have this?
And there you go.
Wow.
1 minute and 11 seconds of incredible dialogue and great acting. Edward G. Robinson almost steals the film. His character, Keyes, is the investigator, and his partner is the suspect, but he doesn't know it.
And it's a romance, but when with a kind of a femme fatale, as always is
totally.
the case,
Yes,
right?
Yes. Usually,
she's not the nicest woman.
No, the femme fatales are always taking advantage of silly men.
Yeah.
Really.
But as this movie progresses, we kind of find out more and more that may have been,
Yeah, this is just a really good film. And I hope, we sold a lot of tickets. I hope most of the people haven't seen it before, because you're in for a real treat. The dialogue, the acting, the visuals. And I always love watching films that are older just for the style, the language, the hats, the clothes, the cars, the furniture. It's a journey back in time to show you what life looked like before you and I were born.
Yeah. And so this event is not just the film. I mean, there really is kind of like a structure to the night, and
we'll have
mood,
yes,
just
we'll
like
have
the films.
Piano jazz in the lobby. We've got some great posters, so we're going to have a gallery. You're going to get to see a lot of great classic movie posters. We'll also have popcorn. We'll have a cash bar, and we'll have a great film noir.
Yeah.
It's 7.
And this is a great place to see a film. You are actually going to be doing an entire series of films.
We're going to do much more. With Sunray closing and San Marco closing, we feel there's a need for us to show some good film. In January, we're going to do a music series. In the spring, we'll do an environmental series. In the summer, we're going to do books to film. So this is just the beginning. This is going to be a new hangout, a place to go see great film. Even if you don't know what the film is, you can trust us that if we're screening it, you should come.
Yeah, if David Luckin is picking it, it's a classic.
And my partner, Cersei.
And Cersei, that's right. So this is 6:30 p.m., doors open?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm sure people will be here a little early. Please come out. The tickets are only $5. You go online at wjct.org/events. I think there's still a few tickets left. It looks like we're going to have a nice packed house.
Good for you. That's terrific.
It's going to be fun.
All right. Well, David Luckin, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
All right. And that's our program. Thanks for listening. If you have any feedback or suggestions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast tonight at 8 o'clock, or you can find all of our programs, our entire archive, on your favorite podcast platform. Join us tomorrow. We're going to be talking to the people behind a proposed bioethanol plant in Fernandina Beach. Thanks for listening. I'm Ann Schindler. It's been First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
Vickers Landing offers elegant retirement living in the heart of Ponte Vedra Beach. Our Sawgrass and Oak Ridge campuses feature amenities galore, resort lifestyle, comprehensive security, and plans for every stage of aging. Retirement redefined. VickersLanding.com.
The Florida Star newspaper has turned 72 years old and is still serving communities as a